Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Grant Writing 101 session. I'm Joanna Goldfarb, the Youth Services and Sustainability Innovation Consultant at RCLS. I just want to remind everyone that this program is being recorded, and I will send out the recording to all registrants once it is ready. Please put your name and library in the chat if your Zoom name does not match the name that you registered with, so that I can take attendance and provide continuing education. After the workshop, I will send a follow-up email and include information on how to request those continuing education certificates and also a program evaluation. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Brittany Campisi has been working in the nonprofit sector for more than 15 years and combines her education in women's studies and nonprofit management to provide holistic support to change makers and artists. And Brittany, I'll pass it off to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Joanna. Welcome, everyone. Can I see a thumbs up if you can see the slides? Can you all see the slides? There should be an intro to grant writing. Great. Excellent. And I see some of you are using the virtual thumbs up. So good. So I'm Brittany, or Britt, and I run a business called Vision Driven Consulting. And I started my business about 13 years ago in Philadelphia, where I was living. And as Joanna said, I work with a lot of artists and arts organizations and not-for-profit organizations of all sizes and across all sectors. I've done my very first professional job in college was in the development department. And so I have actually been working in fundraising and grants for over 20 years. And so I've also done a ton of work with librarians and libraries in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I recently moved back to upstate New York, where I was born and raised in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm actually in Ithaca, New York right now. So I know you all have the snow that I've got. It's good to be back in New York State, and I'm glad to be working with folks in New York again, but just starting to get a sense of the landscape here in terms of funding. So happy to learn from you all while I'm also sharing what I know about general information regarding grants. So as Joanna said, and as you all saw, this is an interactive session. So I am not going to lecture. There's a ton of opportunity for engagement. We're going to be doing some introductions. We are going to do a fun interactive quiz about the language of grants. We're going to read some actual proposals. So you should have all received those proposals in advance. We'll go through some competitive proposal tips, and there will be a ton of time for Q&A throughout the session, but I'll also save some time after the session. So in terms of webinar logistics, if you want to rename yourself, that would be lovely. And if you also want to add your pronouns, that's extremely helpful. In order to rename yourself, your actual name, you hover over your box and there's 3 dots, and you click on those 3 dots and scroll down to the rename button. So you can rename yourself, add your pronouns if you'd like. Gather your materials, pen, pencil, handouts, files, blank piece of paper, coffee, water, anything you need to be comfortable. We will take a break at about the halfway point. Feel free to use the chat box. I see some of you have already done that, so we will continue using the chat. Again, this is interactive. If you are in a place and in a way that you can use your camera, I would love to see more folks on camera. So please, 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 please turn on your camera if you can. We don't care what your background looks like. We don't care if you're at the desk and there's people all over, if there's people in your household, if your house is a mess. This is the way we are now. So I definitely have a preference for your camera if you're able to turn your cameras on. It helps me understand sort of the levels of engagement and what people are doing. So thanks, Tara, for turning your camera on. If other folks want to do that, that would be great. If you can't, that's also fine. I have you all on mute right now, but feel free to raise your hand if you have a question, or feel free to drop information in the chat, or unmute yourself and talk when there are opportunities. It says we are not recording on this slide, but we are recording, and you will receive a copy of the slides after the webinar. And just a reminder, please be patient with yourself, with me, and with the technology. You know, we can't always predict what's going to happen in these types of environments. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Let's see who is on the call. If you have not done so already, in the chat box, please add the name of the library you're here representing today and your role at the library so that we can see who is here. All right, let's see who is here, who's in the chat box. All right, Christine at Piermont, Jen at Daniel Pierce, Joanna, oh, Pam Stockton, and Karita from West Nyack, Anne Marie from Sloatsburg. Excellent. Tara, Alice, director of the library, Stony Point. Bob, good morning. Matthew from Adult Services at New City Library. Excellent. So I know you all are here representing libraries today, and libraries have a lot of organizational structures for funding, and it will be helpful for me to know what is the organizational structure of your library or the fundraising arm of your library. So if you want to write a grant, what is the structure that you are using? 501c3, a fiscally sponsored project. So a lot of friends of libraries are fiscally sponsored. LLCs, sometimes there are LLCs. If there's no formal structure, that's also an option to indicate. So frequently libraries have different types of organizing structures, and that can determine the type of funding you might be eligible for. So it looks like we've got 9 folks who've answered the question. I'll give you about 30 more seconds. It looks like we've got 21 people on the call. So let's see if we can get at least half of the group responding to this question. It looks like we have a bit of a range, with most folks having 501c3, some folks having no formal structure. At least one entity has a fiscally sponsored project, is a fiscally sponsored project. All right, and I'm going to share the results back so you all can see that there's quite a bit of range, but there are majority of folks on the call are 501c3s. So that's helpful to know. And another question I would like to ask is, what is your library or your project or department budget range? So if you are thinking about fundraising, you might be just thinking about one particular department or one particular project or program that's, you know, a smaller budget range. But if you are thinking about raising funds for your entire library, that's a larger budget range that we're thinking about. If you're just here, you know, just getting a lay of the land, you might say this is not applicable, or we don't have a budget yet. So let me know what type of budget ranges we're looking at here. This will also help me, you know, guide you in what types of grants to look for, the types of things you're thinking about. All right, what is your library or project department budget range? All right, it looks like the majority of folks who've responded to this question said not applicable. So maybe you're here just thinking about how to help others apply for grants. So if you responded not applicable, can you either unmute yourself and let me know why, or put in the chat box why you responded not applicable in terms of your library budget range? I'll share these results with folks so you can see. I'm really curious because this, I have curriculum, but it helps me to know what types of things you all are thinking about. Here to help others apply for grants new to this position. Excellent. All right, that's helpful. It's a different type of conversation then. So Pam, that's helpful information. Anyone else? Things you're thinking about today? Currently, we're not fundraising. I'd like to learn about grant writing so that if the opportunity presents itself, I can assist. Great, thanks, Mary, that's helpful. All right. Interested in overview for both public info and for the library. Great, thanks, Bob. Oh, there was one more person in the chat. Great. Okay, so I like to start with the myth of the magical grant writer. As someone who is frequently hired as a grant writer for many organizations, there's this perception that if you hire someone who's called a grant writer, that we have this pixie dust and we can basically sprinkle it on any application and it becomes a winning application. That's not actually true. All of you can be magical, mythical grant writers. There's just a lot of sort of tradition, background information, special language, ways of accessing information about funding that we learn over the years. And to be perfectly honest, the majority of how to win a grant is not in the writing, it's in the research. So all of you as librarians can appreciate the role of research in acquiring funding. It's really about ensuring that there's a match between what the funder wants to fund and what you want funded. All right, so we aren't actually going to be getting into the writing aspect of grant writing. We are going to be getting into all of the background stuff that goes into finding the grants and then aspects of a competitive proposal. So all of you are going to leave here with additional information to help you become magical, mythical grant writers. I'm happy to announce. A huge part of this is the language. So some of the grant world is extremely inaccessible because people don't even know what they're talking about in the applications. So what we're going to do is learn a little bit about the language of grants. So Joanna sent you out this matching sheet. And when I looked at it, I think the formatting was off. Was the formatting off on the matching sheet, the grant terms matching that you all saw, or was it good? Either way, we're going to try something a little bit different. If any of you have ever tried a Kahoot before, this is something a lot of the kids at school are working on. There's a new tool being developed for virtual education, and we are going to utilize this today. So if you want to participate in this interactive, slightly competitive quiz to learn some of the ins and outs of grant writing, some of the things about language, we are going to play a game called Kahoot. So if you have your cell phone with you, you can take a picture of this QR code that you see on your screen. And when you hold your phone up to the QR code, it should give you this little thing that says website or QR code, open Kahoot in Safari. So it should give you that. And then if you click on it, it should say Kahoot. It should look like this. If you don't have a cell phone, or if you'd prefer not to use your cell phone, you can also go to the website listed here, www.kahoot.it. And that's going to ask you for your game pin. And the game pin is listed here, 616973. And so when you join, I am going to see your name. Excellent. I see Pam, Matthew, Mary, Kiana, Chrissy. Great. Alice, Tara, Joanna, Jackie. Great. So I see you all are figuring out how to join. If you can't figure out how to join, or if you don't want to participate in this aspect of it, you can also respond in the chat, or you can just shout out the answers. You know, it's not required, but I do find that it's way more fun and also cool to learn how to use this new technology, so that you all can utilize this technology at your libraries. All right, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds. We've got a good critical mass of folks who are interested in playing. 9, 8, and if you're having trouble joining, and if you want to join, you can unmute yourself and we can try to troubleshoot, or you can let us know in the chat. All right, otherwise, let's go ahead and get, oh, we lost someone. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we are going to start. Introduction to grants. All right, so this is getting you used to it. Are you ready to learn about grants? You have 20 seconds to answer. All right, I see that many of you are figuring out how to answer. You can see the question on my screen and on your phone. All right, so this is just a test question. Very good. Now we get into the nitty-gritty. True or false? The #1 reason people donate to nonprofit organizations is for the tax write-off. True or false? All right, that answer is false. Does anyone know the #1 or the top 5 reasons people donate to nonprofit organizations? Feel free to unmute yourself and say it out loud, or put it in the chat.
Connection with the cause.
Yep, that's one of the reasons. Support a good cause, yep. What else? Support for organization. Any other ideas? One of the biggest reasons people donate to nonprofit organizations is because somebody asked them personally. So this is really important, because there's a direct connection between the person and the cause. So even if they don't care about it, they care about the person who cares about it. All right, it looks like Joanna is at the top. So it's not only that you get the right answer, but it's how quickly you get the right answer. All right, so here we go. Here's the next one. Which of these is not an acronym used in the world of grants? RFP, RFA, LOI, NOFO or NOFA, or TOC? All right, it looks like 8 of you got that right. LOI is letter of inquiry, and that is the information that funders might ask for if they don't if they don't send you an actual application. And typically when funders say, please send us an LOI or a letter of inquiry, they will tell you exactly what they want in that letter of inquiry. Helps if you click on the actual game and not just the screen share on Zoom. Sorry, Alice. Yeah, you can't just poke the computer screen. All right, so TOC can refer to theory of change or table of contents, but that's not specifically grant language. RFP or RFA means request for proposals or request for applications. NOFO and NOFA is notice of funding opportunity or a notice of funding applications. And so again, this is like, how are you supposed to know that there's money on the table? When you see any of these acronyms, aside from TOC, that means there is money on the table. All right, it looks like Teresa and Matthew kicked Joanna out of first place. Let's keep going. In 2020, how much money did people in the US give to charity, according to Giving USA? All right, the answer is $471.44 billion. And part of the reason I included this question is I wanted you all to have the resource Giving USA 2021 or Giving USA. Annually, they are the biggest researcher of where people give every year. And so you can see which sector people give to, the quantity that people give to each sector, and many libraries have access to the full like 200-page report, but you can access a free version of the report online. And I use that pretty frequently. All right, Teresa holding strong in first place. To which sector did the majority of those dollars go in 2021? Religion, education, health, or the environment? Religion. So many of these giving numbers are dramatically skewed because, as you know, faith-based institutions collect a lot of funds, and educational institutions like universities collect a lot of funds. So we're not thinking exclusively about charities that are small grassroots organizations, but a lot of larger entities take that funding. All right, Teresa holding strong, but Alice moved right up in there. Alice, maybe you were the only one who got that one right. Number 6, which of these terms describe a portion of a grant that is awarded from a larger grant? Mini grant, seed money, sub-grant, or matching funds? All right, many of you got that one. So a sub-grant. So these are all, again, just different words. A mini grant is a small dollar amount. Seed money is funding to start a new project. And matching funds is a really important one because sometimes when you look at a grant application, it will say, this grant requires a 1-to-1 or dollar-for-dollar match. Does anyone know what that means? Can anyone describe what that means?
If I donate $100 to a charity, then whoever is matching the funds would also donate $100 to the same charity.
That is when you are on the donation side, but when you are on the receiving side from a foundation, it requires a match. So does anyone know what that might mean? So you're submitting an application and it says, we require a 1-to-1 or dollar-for-dollar match.
I mean, it's basically the same thing, but flipped. So if you receive, $500,000 worth of grant funding, then your organization also has to put up $500,000 worth of funding towards the project or whatever it is the grant was for.
Absolutely. So that's extremely important, right? Because you have to have those resources on hand, or a plan to bring in those resources in order to acquire that funding. All right.
But you could do a fundraiser to get those funds, correct?
It depends, because every single grant is different. And so they will tell you, some allow you in-kind matches, which means you can count non-monetary contributions, you can count staff time, but some require dollar for dollar match. Some require that you have the money in advance. Some require that you have a plan to raise that money. Some, say you need to get that money within 2 years. It's really different for every grant, which means you have to read all of the guidance in advance. Good question, Debbie. All right, looks like Matthew slid right up to the top. Question number 7, which is an example of a sub-grant? Ben & Jerry's, corporate giving programs, AmeriCorps funding, or Subway Foundation? Psst, there's a hint. All right, so there was a hint in the picture. AmeriCorps funding. So a lot of government funding is an example of a sub-grant, like NEA, NFA, AmeriCorps. The government gives out a chunk of money to a particular entity like NEA or the National Endowment for the Arts. And they will sub-grant it to statewide organizations, and they will sub-grant it to local organizations. And so the importance of knowing where that sub-grant is coming from is that usually those entities have guidance from the higher up entities. And so, it's not that direct entity that you're applying to that makes the guidance. It's like 3 tiers up. All right, Carita, you took the first place from Matthew. Let's keep going. Number 8, which type of entity gives the most to charitable contributions annually? Corporations, individuals, foundations, or estates through bequest? And that's when someone passes away and gives something after they die or in their will. All right, individuals give around 70% of the dollars that go to charities. And so many organizations spend 90% of their time fundraising through foundations, even though foundations only give about 20 to 30% of funding, and individuals give about 70% to all charitable organizations. Now, this is again skewed for these larger religious, health, and educational institutions. A lot of grassroots organizations do get significant funding from foundations, but as you all know, many libraries get the majority of their funds from individual contributions. And I do like to include this so that as you are thinking about the amount of time and energy it takes to apply for grants, you're also thinking about other types of fundraising opportunities. And particularly when you have people who are coming to you saying, I want to start a nonprofit organization because I want access to grant money. This is not a good reason to start a not-for-profit organization. I frequently say, we don't need new nonprofit organizations. There are a ton of organizations out there. What grant money do you want access to? And can you actually get access to that grant money if you are a new nonprofit that doesn't have any credibility or any programming started? So you may be hearing this in your libraries pretty frequently. I need to start a 501c3 so I can access grants. that is not a good reason. Becoming a fiscally sponsored project is a much better route because it has far less paperwork. You can still bring in a range of different types of charitable contributions through a fiscally sponsored project. Any questions about that? Since I know you probably are all frequently fielding that conversation with community members. All right, Carita, you are holding that streak with 3 correct answers in a row. Let's see if you can get the next 2. True or false? Unrestricted funds or general operating support are the most common and easiest types of grant funding to find. That is false. The most common and easiest type of grant funding to find is program funding or restricted grants. Now, one of the things I will say is that the pandemic and the racial reckonings that we've been having over the past 3 to 5 years have dramatically impacted philanthropy and the way that philanthropy is funding. Philanthropy has historically been extremely problematic, really funding their own in terms of prioritizing funding wealthier, larger, white-led organizations and ignoring Black and POC-led organizations that are more on the grassroots. And so one of the ways that they're righting this wrong is providing more general operating support and more multi-year funding, more larger funding amounts, smaller applications, programs specifically for Black-led organizations. And so historically, it's been really challenging because, as you all know, the #1 thing that organizations need to run are unrestricted funds, mostly to pay staff. And so these are funds that have been extremely challenging to find because how do you hold a program if you can't pay staff? And so frequently funds will be offered through foundations for programming, but they won't cover staff or the building or technology, that sort of thing. So I am happy to say that some of this is shifting, but still not at a rate that is sustainable. So if you have a program or a project that you specifically want funded, it is far easier to find grant funding for that than staffing or overhead like building costs. And feel free to jump in at any time with questions, either in the chat or unmute yourself. I'm moving right along, but. All right, Carita, holding your #1 space. Last question. Which of the following is an example of a corporate foundation? This one's kind of tricky. An employee giving program, Walton Family Foundation, Walmart Stores, or Walmart Foundation? Walmart Foundation. So I intentionally gave a pretty tricky example. So you have the Walton family, and they are, you know, a father and a bunch of siblings, and each of those family members has their own individual foundation, and then collectively they have the Walton Family Foundation. So those are individual foundations, family foundations. The Walmart stores, you can approach them and ask them for funding or gifts in kind, but that is not a corporate foundation. That is corporate giving, but it's not a corporate foundation. The Walmart Foundation is Walmart gives a portion of its funds. Typically, corporations give 5% of the total charitable contributions in the United States. So that it's not a ton of money, but they do, you know, market at a much higher rate their funding than anybody else. And then there's employee giving programs, and those are a different way of giving. All right, in third place is Jackie. Congratulations. Second place is Alice. And in first place is Carita. Congratulations. All right, great job, everyone. So that was a different kind of way of going through some of the language of grants. Does anyone have any questions on any of the language that we went through, either on that slide or in the handout? Any questions about language that you heard or that you saw? All right, so now we are going to keep going. I got more slides here. So it's important to know that no two funders are the same and no two applications are the same. So each of your grant applications should be unique. And so what I liken this to is applying for a job. Whenever you've applied for a job, or you've applied for more than one job, you don't send the same resume and cover letter for every job. And so nowadays, all of the funders ask for different information in their applications. And so you can't just copy and paste the same letter of inquiry and send it to everybody. You can't just send one application to a bunch of people. Each application needs to be unique and responding to each of the funders. That being said, there are some sort of standards that every grant application asks for. Does anyone want to share in the chat or verbally what are some common pieces of grant applications that funders ask for pretty regularly? Census data, what else? So they do ask for data, information. A narrative, yep. A grant narrative. Population size. Some of these are getting into the nitty-gritty. What are some broad topics? Some broad headlines? Yeah, Joanna, mission statement. Almost every grant application wants to know your mission statement. They frequently want to know your vision, your organizational history. What else? Mary said narrative. So they want to know what type of program you're applying for, or the project you're applying for in narrative form. What else? What do they want to know? Yeah, the why. So Debbie, that can be a number of questions. So they might want to know, what is the community need, right? That's how they want to frame it. Mary, they don't typically ask for bank statements, but they will ask for budgets, both organizational and program budgets, and they will ask for your audit, your annual. Sometimes they ask for your annual report. Frequently they ask for your audit, proof of 501c3 status. Yep. Kiana said how to allocate the money. Yeah, so what you're going to spend that money on. And so they'll typically ask for a program or a project budget. And then many of you talked about the data. So they do want to know impact or number of program participants, that type of thing. All right, so I included some of those in there. And typically when they're not asking for an application, but just a letter of inquiry, those are the things that will go in there. So you could create sort of a boilerplate with all of that information in there, and then copy and paste or modify it, adjust it Oh, the other thing that they frequently want to know is your board of directors. They want that list. So those are sort of standard, nearly every application asks for those things, but they all ask for it in a totally different way. And so you have to respond to whatever the funder says pretty precisely. So key to winning an application is knowing who collects those applications, who is making those decisions, how are those decisions made? And so I want to ask you all, how do you know the answers to any of these questions? How do you find out who collects the applications or who's making the decisions or how those decisions are made? Where might you find that information?
The application might say who to send the application to. And you can look up based on their email, their name on whatever company's website.
Sure. Typically, who collects applications is the program officer, and they are not typically the person who makes the decisions, but they are the gatekeepers and they're also the helpers. And so this is one of the secrets of the industry that many people don't know is you can reach out to the program officers, and frequently you should before applying for a different grant. I will not apply for funding anymore if I don't have a direct communication with a program officer, because it can save you tons of time and effort. And it can also sort of ping that program officer so they know to look out for your application. And when I've had good relationships with program officers, if you make a mistake in your application or you need an extension, they're the people that you can communicate with directly. So establishing a relationship with them early on is a really good idea. But they are not typically the person who makes the decisions. They're the ones who usually will make sure that the funder has the actual applications and all the pieces of it that they want. How else might you find out who makes the decisions? Or like what percentage of the funding they give for the allocate, or what percentage of the points go for your budget or your narrative, that sort of information. Or what sectors they give out money to. Any ideas? All right, so there are a ton of databases, and many of your libraries probably have access to these databases, but one of the biggest and best ones is the Foundation Directory online. Yeah, Kristen, IRS 990 forms. These are excellent forms, and that tells how much every foundation gives and to which organizations every year. And you can find those forms on guidestar.org, and everyone has access to guidestar.org. I use that frequently. You can also just go to the foundation's website, and it should have that information on there. All right, so now we are going to do an activity where we read actual grant applications. So all of you should have received those in an email. It's a 4-page document, and they are 4 applications: Logan Youth Arts Program, the Strawberry Festival installation, the Philly Drum Project, and Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project trainings. And this was an actual program that used to exist in Philadelphia. And does someone want to read this slide? This is what a Philly Stake grant funds and what they ask for. Can I ask for someone to read that slide? Anyone volunteer?
A recurring event celebrating locally sourced food and creative community projects organized completely by volunteers. At each dinner, project proposals are presented to the diners. Community members pay $20 donation for dinner and an opportunity to vote for the project they deem most worthy of funding. These projects aim to contribute to the vitality of Philadelphia in a multitude of innovative ways. Awareness will lead with the dinner proceeds. Awardees will leave with the dinner proceeds. Read the whole thing. Application questions. Describe the projects a Philly State grant would help you accomplish. 100 words. How will your project benefit a community in Philadelphia? 75 words. Tell us a little about yourself and what led you to the current creative goals. Why are you the right person or persons to carry out this project? List your estimated expenses.
Thanks, Debbie. All right, so I'm going to give you all time to read through these applications, and we are going to vote on the winner. These are all real projects in Philadelphia, and you're going to see what it feels like to be on the other side, on the awarding side. And what I've heard from people is that this is the most useful way to learn about writing a grant, is to read actual grants. And so as you're reading through these applications, think about what you liked about each proposal and what you didn't like. What were some things that made you say, oh gosh, this is a stellar proposal. I really like this. I want to fund this project. And what were some things that as you were reading through, you said, you know what, I really feel like they could have done X, Y, Z with this response. They didn't do this well enough. So we are going to use these applications to determine 12 aspects of a competitive proposal. And I'm going to ask you all to contribute to that response. So be ready to vote. We will also take this time to take a break. So I want you to read the 4 proposals, take a little bit of a break, come back ready to vote on the best proposal. And I will be here if you have any questions. So we will come back. It's 10:50. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to read these and take a break. Let's come back at 11:10 and ready to dive right in. All right, any questions? Excellent. We will be back here at 11:10.
If anyone needs me to resend these examples, just let me know in the chat and I'll send you an email.
Tara, if you're having trouble, there's an up arrow next to the video, and you should be able to select your camera option. Looks like there's some other folks who are able to get on. All right, thanks folks for letting us know you are back. All right, excellent, excellent. Oh, there you are, Tara. Good, good, good. Now is the moment of truth. We are going to vote on the winner. All right, so who would you vote for to win? Logan Youth Arts Program, Strawberry Festival installation, Philly Drum Project, or Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project trainings. Ooh, this is getting very close. If you haven't voted yet, definitely vote because each vote is going to count in this one. Looks like we've got 14 votes. If anyone wants to make their contribution, you've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I will share the results with you all. It looks like the Logan Youth Arts Program won by a very slim margin. Folks voted for every project, but Logan Youth Arts won by 1 vote. Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project was 2nd, Philly Drum Project was 3rd, and the Strawberry Festival installation was 4th. All right, so let's start with the first one. For those of you who liked and voted for the Logan Youth Arts Program, why did you vote for it? So feel free to unmute yourself or share in the chat. What did you like about that proposal?
Well, I picked that program and it was because the money didn't go to the people. One person actually wrote the grant and was going to get some of the money themselves, and the other ones were going to pay lawyers to do the project. So this actually, all the money went to the program and to the people they were serving. That's why I chose that.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Other folks, why did you pick that one? Or what did you like about it?
So if I remember correctly, in the grant, in the language surrounding the grant, it had said that they wanted it to go to very specific areas in Philly, like they wanted it to be directed at not what their specific areas, but they wanted it to affect neighborhoods specifically. And this one was the Logan area so it seemed like it fulfilled the terms of the grant the best.
Great, so you felt like there was a lot of alignment between what the funder wanted to fund and what the applicant was applying for. Great. Mary says, I like the age group that would participate. There are not a lot of programs besides sports and dance for children 10 to 14 years old. Great. Did anyone have anything about that application that they didn't like? So if you didn't vote for that one, why didn't you? Was there something about the proposal that you felt was a little bit lacking or you would have liked to see?
So for me, it was between this one and the very last proposal. And what I would have liked to see on this one is, since it was one person doing the whole thing and it was a college student, if I were giving them money, I would want to know that the person who is spending it kind of knows how to spend it responsibly. So even if they had said, I have an advisor who's going to help me, I think that would have pushed it forward for me. But yeah, it's kind of the lack of experience of the person who is applying, paired with at least them not stating that they have someone outside who's going to advise them and help them out.
Right, and Pam agrees. The person running the program might be too young and inexperienced. Excellent. All right, so in second place was Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project. And again, this was a dramatically different type of proposal. So for the folks who liked that one, what did you like about that proposal? What made it a winning proposal? Pam says, I believe in their cause. Mary says, the amount of community and long-term impact. So it's funny because you can see in this one that even if you're giving $20 to the project, you really want that $20 to stretch. So think about these funders who are giving away millions of dollars and all of the things they ask for, because they're feeling that like, I really want to see this impact of my $20. I really want to see the impact of my $1 million. Was someone about to say something? Sorry, I interrupted.
I like that they had clear goals and included the process of how they would achieve those goals.
Yeah, they were, this proposal was extremely clear. You kind of get the sense that two lawyers are writing it, right? There's a different way in which they respond to the questions versus some of the other proposals. Anyone else, something you like particularly about that proposal? Kiana, it has a far-reaching capability and will benefit more people. Great. It was well written. I thought it had the best chance of helping more people in the long run. Yeah, so you really saw that sustainability, that long-term impact. Great. Providing a new service that doesn't exist. Excellent. All good reasons. And you can see that each of you approached it from a different angle, right? So everybody is reading these applications through their own individual lens, which is why, you know, who is reading it really matters. And so writing to the people who are reading it can be really helpful. I will say that I've facilitated this workshop a number of times, and I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm always surprised that the winner changes according to the group that's reading it. And it's fascinating to me to see how people are processing the information and what you think makes a winning proposal, right? So it's not cut and dry. It's not like, of course, this proposal is going to win because X, Y, Z. It's like, we all come in with our biases, which is why it matters who is reading the proposals and what the questions are. All right, let's move on to the Strawberry Festival installation. What did folks like about that proposal? Folks who voted for it, what did you like about that proposal? Or even if you didn't vote for it, what was good about that proposal?
Something I liked was that the grant was being given at, I think, a food-related event, and that this proposal was also food-related, so it just had that tie-in.
Mm-hmm. Bob says it seemed to connect best with the funders' goals. Yeah. Right. A lot of you are thinking about what is the point of this grant and which of these projects best, you know, gets to that, which again says, are you in alignment with the funder when you are applying for those funds? Jacqueline said, I felt it was written in a more personal style. Oops, I scrolled down. Which allowed the reader to connect more to the writer. Oh, Jacqueline, I appreciate this because frequently we sit down to write a grant and many of us write with this jargon, right? We think that it has to look or sound a certain way, but depending on the audience, the personalization of it, the passion behind the project can really make or break whether or not your application comes to the top. Pam said, I didn't vote for it because the title was confusing. I took Strawberry Festival literally. I thought it was murky as far as the real purpose. Yeah, so if you have a small word count, you really have to get right into what is this? You really have to answer those questions directly. You can't, you know, give a political answer to any of these questions where you know, don't actually respond straight on. And so you can see some of the proposals did a better job of responding directly to the questions. And the last one, Philly Drum Project. What did folks like about that proposal? did you like about the Philly Drum Project proposal? A couple folks voted for it.
Mistaken, but I think it was an ongoing program.
Mhm.
So since Pam said it, they have the groundwork done. So you're funding something that's already been successful.
Yeah, so some funders want to see evidence of success. They want to see that this is a continuation. This isn't seed money. This isn't the first time, like the Logan Youth Arts Project. It's not the first time a project has been done, but you're funding something that has been done once before. You know that it's going to happen again. For folks who didn't fund this project, what didn't you like about that proposal? Sometimes we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot about what we didn't like. Mary said, I like that it is a youth program. Why didn't you like this proposal? Why didn't you vote for it? Kiana says it was only drums and it should include more instruments. Yeah, there was a particular aspect of the proposal that didn't quite resonate for you. Anyone else want to respond to that? Oh, Jacqueline, this is a good response. It wasn't that I didn't like it. It was just that I felt that another was more worthy. And as we're applying for funding, this is really important to hold in mind is it's not just your application, it's every other application that's going in that you're being judged against, even if the scorecard is not putting you against other applications. We are all human, right? And so the people on the other side are absolutely weighing your application against the others. If you ever apply for a project and don't receive funding, another sort of tip or trick of the field is you can always ask for feedback. You can say, why didn't I receive this funding? Should I apply again in the future? What might I change about the application that would have made me more eligible for this funding? And depending on how local or personal the program officer wants to get, you can ask the question, are there other sources of funding that I should be applying to? Are there other funders who might be interested in this proposal? Pam, you would typically ask the program officer for that information. Not all funders will give that feedback, but the more hyper local or personal you get, that is the person who will typically offer feedback. And more frequently, the funders are offering that feedback either via a phone call or in just a sentence or two in response to your email. And so that is really helpful information. And one of the things that they don't often tell you is that you can ask that. All right, any last comments on that proposal reading process? Comments on how it went for you, what it felt like to be on the reader's side of it, things that you really didn't like or really learned throughout that process. Any other feedback you want to offer? All right, so we are going to keep going. This is just a little cartoon that I thought was entertaining. Wouldn't it be lovely if program officers just said, hello, how much do you need? And so as I said in the beginning, the writing of the grant is really one small part of the whole process. So the biggest challenge is often finding the funding and then reviewing it to make sure you're eligible, there's common threads, making contact with the program officer to ensure that you should be submitting, or maybe asking specific questions about what you should be submitting for. And then writing and submitting the grant is the last piece. Any questions about this process? One of the best ways to find grants or funding is to start with organizations or programs that are similar to yours. So start with other libraries in your region or state and seeing what grants they've received. Or if you have community-based folks who are asking you, where should I even start? Tell them to look at the websites of similar organizations. There are databases available, but typically those databases will just give you, hundreds of results, and it'll be hard to narrow it down. But you can narrow it down right off the bat by looking at other similar types of organizations. Any questions about that process? All right, so now we're going to go through these 12 tips for competitive proposals. And some of what's fun about this is you all have already said a bunch of these as we went through some of those other grant proposals. So as readers what some of these competitive tips are. And the first 6 are really, intro, basic, and the second 6 are next level. And as you get to writing, you'll sort of understand the ins and outs of what those mean. So a lot of these tips come from my experience and my colleagues' experiences, and also speaking with a ton of program officers and saying, if you could give advice to first-time applicants, what would you tell them? And the top things that they say are, we really, really want to make sure applicants follow the instructions, read all of the information. We spend so much time putting out those application instructions. We really want people to read that. We want people to only apply if they meet our eligibility requirements. If they tell you only a 501c3 with a full-time, at least one full-time staff person and a budget of under $200,000 are eligible, don't apply if you don't meet those requirements. That really just immediately gets you out of the running. You've wasted your time and energy. You've wasted the time and energy of the funder. If you have specific personalized questions about those eligibility requirements, you can always call or email the contact person on the application to find that out. Your application shouldn't contain any errors. These can be spelling errors, they could mean grammatical errors, they can mean, any number of errors. You want to make sure that your application doesn't contain errors. What is a way you might ensure that your application doesn't contain errors? Tips and tricks, folks. Other people should proofread it. Yeah, use your spell check. Ask someone to look it over. I frequently say that grant writing should be a team sport. Just like you wouldn't send a newsletter out to your community without having a second reader, you should not send a grant to a funder without having a second reader. All right. Your application should be submitted on time and through the correct channels. Again, this is something that has dramatically shifted over the years that I've been in fundraising. Back when I first started, almost every funder would say, please send us X copies of your application via, UPS, expedited service. You would have to make these huge packets for each reader. And so we would be sending these big packets of printouts. It has to be postmarked by the due date. And that was the process for nearly every funder. And now every funder is using a different online portal. And so that comes with its own set of nightmares. In my intermediate class, I usually ask people for stories. I know that a lot of you are new to the grant writing process. but I will open it up. Does anyone have a dramatic story about submitting an application on time or through the correct channel that you want to share? You know, a telltale story for the folks on the call. I will say that something that I'm frequently experiencing now as a seasoned grant writer is foundations who are switching to new virtual software, and we are testing it out for the first time. Inevitably, this software will crash the first year right when the applications are due, because everybody waits till the last minute. And so if you know that a funder is using a new software for their applications, definitely test the software out you know, in advance, and make sure you're not submitting at the last minute. All right, so that's a little pro tip on this new era of funders using new virtual software. And then the next two tips: your proposal should tell a clear and consistent story from start to finish. Now, when you read through the applications, you can see that some of them did a better job than others of telling a clear and consistent story from start to finish. Someone mentioned that the Strawberry Festival proposal was pretty confusing. It didn't totally make sense from start to finish. You weren't totally sure what they were doing. And then your application package should include the financial information that is clear, correct, and aligns with the grant and budget narratives. I think there was one application, the Logan Youth Arts Program, where you said, you know, I'm not totally sure what this money is going for. I understand the narrative, but I'm not sure that the budget matches the narrative. So you could see there was sort of inconsistency from beginning to end. The narrative and the budgets should match. Any questions on those first 6 tips? No? All right, we'll keep going. The proposal should tell a compelling story. I think the Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project proposal really does a good job of telling a compelling story. And one of the things they do that none of the other applicants did was include a quote. So they really got the feel for the impact by using a qualitative methodology to share what that story entails. So you really got a sense that this is going to impact people, and you can see from the quote how that was going to impact people. Another way to talk about, you know, to make it compelling is to include qualitative and quantitative data to show actual need. Can someone explain what I mean by that? What does qualitative and quantitative mean, and how do you show actual need?
I can answer this, but I feel like there are definitely people here who know the answer. Yeah, so charts and statistics in the chat. Yeah, including those charts and statistics and hard numbers, and also the story side, personal anecdotes. So I guess merging those would show the actual need.
Yeah, absolutely. David says fact checking, focus groups. Yeah, coming up with some way that makes sense for your program to show actual need, and sharing that with the funder. They want to know, how do you know that this program that you're proposing, this project you're proposing, is actually going to impact communities? And so all of you at libraries are engaging individual community members. So you may start like keeping a tally, like in any given week, I hear from 3 different people that this type of program would be helpful. I've noticed that as people are using our computers, so many of them are using them to develop resumes and cover letters. It would be really beneficial to develop a workforce development program based on this need that I see every day in our libraries, or get a quote from an individual that says, this program was extremely beneficial. I hope you host it again. That sort of thing. Put those in your application, and it really makes your application stand out from some of the other applications. In addition to showing need, you want to also show evidence of success and values of this program and or organization. One of the things that I like to tell people is I've been on the reading side of applications frequently, and 100% of applications that I've ever read have said, this program is important and creates a positive impact on community. Number one, what community? Everybody is using the language of community. Everybody says their program has an impact, and everybody says their program has a positive impact. As a reader, it means nothing to me if you don't personalize it. Really show evidence of success, the value of impact of your program or your project. Really define who it is you mean every time you say the word community, because community can literally mean every single person in the world, and we know that that's not your target demographic, right? So getting really clear, really detailed about why your program or project is important specifically. Providing evidence of collaborations, relationships, and partnerships. Again, when we read through those proposals, you wanted to see your money stretch. Foundation funders want to see their dollars stretch too. So if you can show that their dollars are going really far because you are partnering with XYZ organization, you already have that partnership established. That money is going to go twice as far because you're going to reach twice the number of people. Funders feel really good about their dollars going pretty far. In addition to showing how you know that there is need, you're going to show how you plan to evaluate or assess the program after it's complete. So what are the methodologies you're going to use? What are the resources you're going to use to know that your program was successful? Many funders will ask for a report at the end of the grant, and they will ask you for that information. And so in advance of the program, you want to know how you are going to assess success. And they're going to frequently ask for that information. You also want to demonstrate financial support from other sources. And I include this because every funder wants a budget, a program budget, and they want to know where else you're getting your funding from. They will tell you frequently how they want that broken down. But if they don't, again, that's another question for a program officer that you can ask. Any questions on these next 6? I know that was a lot of information, and if you have had experiences or if you get frequent questions from your community members on these things, or if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, feel free to ask questions here. I'll scroll through those slides so you can see them again. So Tara asks, does number 12 refer to salaries that your organization is paying staff who implement the program? When they ask for budgets, they will frequently want to know salaries. But if you're showing support from other sources, it's really talking about revenue. So they want to know if you are applying to the Walmart Foundation for $5,000, but your program costs $10,000. Where are you going to get the other $5,000 to run that program. So if they're only giving you half of that revenue that you need, what other sources of funding are you going to find to complete the cost of that program? That makes sense, Tara? Hopefully. Great. Debbie asks, where do you go to look for grants? All right, so one of the sources I told you is looking at other people's websites to see what foundations or funders they list on there. Another source is the foundation directory online. And I'm going to ask you all to share any resources that you know. How might you look for grants or funding? And while you are all sharing those things, I'm also going to say, looking at newsletters for particularly hyper-local community organizations. This is one of the things that, depending on where you are, there are really particular e-blasts or newsletters that you might want to look at. If you're in the arts, I know that NYFA or New York Funders for the Arts, Joanna says Newburgh has access to these grant databases. And so typically you will have access to some of those databases through your libraries. Grant Professionals Online, Foundation Directory Online. These are really big resources. And for programs that are really hyper local, really looking at your local community foundations first is the best way to find funding. So typically, when you look at Foundation Directory Online, GrantsWatch, Grant Professionals Online, try to really hone in on the hyper-local foundations before you go to statewide or national foundations. That will give you a better understanding of who funds small community-led projects like the ones you are likely to need funding. You can also look at funding sources that your library, your sort of umbrella library goes for, and going to them and saying, hey, you know, can we submit our proposal with you to go for this big funding pot of this larger donor. Other questions? So that is all I have for today. If you want to contact me directly, you can reach out, Brittany at visiondrivenconsulting.com. There is a LinkedIn group that I frequently share national opportunities and information and resources in the nonprofit world. And this is a time for any other Q&A or questions that you have on anything having to do with the world of grants and funding. Kiana asks, is there a limit to how many grants you can apply for? No way, there's no limit. The pie is the sky, or the sky is the limit. You can apply for as many grants as you want because grant funding is not a given. Right, you can apply for the same program multiple times, even if you're applying for one grant for $5,000 and that will cover your program. It's not a sure shot that that money is going to come into you. So you should be applying for multiple grants for one program. David says, how can you prepare your staff to answer questions about proposed programs from visitors to the library? David, can you clarify your question either by verbally articulating it? I'm not quite understanding.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking about like if they have any questions about funding, maybe a library tax levy on their property taxes, that type of thing. They may have concerns about that, for whether it's, you know, a kind of project proposal, maybe it's a library expansion or anything like that. How would you go about instructing your staff to provide the accurate information so that, you know,
Are you
if
talking
anything is
about individual donors Like if there's an
Um,
individual who wants to give and they're concerned that their individual dollars are going to something else?
Just any questions that they may have about the program, whether it could be um, anything that increases the budget of the library and has to be voted on, and anything like that. If it's involving donors or just library patrons that come in asking questions about a project proposal, how do you instruct your library staff to give them accurate information so as not to well, I think I'll end there. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, Joanna, you look like you know the answer to this.
So right now, David, we're taking grant specific questions, but I think the answer generally for your question would be to speak to the library director to make sure that all staff are on the same page as to any proposed budget changes. If there are grant components, certainly I think it would be okay for staff to say, yes, we're doing a major construction and a certain percentage is going to be covered by a grant. But for, library policy questions and specific patron services, you feel free to reach out to me after, but right now we're kind of grant specific.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off subject. Okay.
That's okay. Thanks, David, and thanks, Joanna. Tara asks, what happens if you receive multiple grants for the same program? Do you receive one? Tara, this is a great question and a good problem to have. And frequently funders will give you the grant if you say, we received 2 grants for this program. I mean, this is the benefit of general operating funds, is there's no limit to what you can receive in terms of general operating funds. But if you're applying for a very specific program, you get 2 grants. One of the things that I have seen done is making sure that both funders are okay with it, and 9 times out of 10 they are, because they think it's valuable. And then you can either use the surplus funds for another project, you can use it for the next year of the project, you can use it to pay staff, or you can say, actually, our project costs twice this much. We only, submitted for 5,000 and it actually costs 10,000. So that's what we're going to do. But this is another conversation with the funder. And that's a great way to have the relationship with the program officer to ensure that you can constantly have those types of conversations. But yeah, it's a good problem to have two grants for the same program. Other questions?
Just a follow up to that, if you do have surplus funds for whatever reason and you would like to use them for something else, do you typically have to get approval from the grant funder?
Yeah, and this is kind of tricky because each funder has different requirements on how to report. And so it's tricky because you get money coming into your organization all the time. They're not going to follow that exact dollar that they're giving you. And you know that you're going to spend more than that on your overall functioning. And so typically, what I advise is figure out the reporting requirements for each funder. So if your report doesn't require you to show financials, like this is following your dollar. So for example, Knight Foundation is one of those foundations that I know they want actual documentation to follow the dollar that they gave you to its expenditure. 90% of other funders don't ask for that level of detail. And so you need that funding to run your organization anyway. So just show everybody that you spent that $5,000 on your program, even if it's from multiple sources. You spent at least $5,000 on your program. And this is sort of common practice. Just make sure you can provide the funder the type of reporting that they want to see at the end of the year. But it's a good strategy to go for multiple sources of program funding, because you're going to need that surplus, what we're calling surplus, which is actually just the money needed to run your program. You're going to need that for other resources. You know, it's political and it's a funky game to play, but if you can get multiple sources of funding, that, you know, just make sure you can meet the grantor's reporting requirements. Any other questions? These are all phenomenal questions that you've got. All right, well, if that is all, I'm going to leave you all here and say thank you for your participation today. Thank you for hosting me, Joanna. I appreciate being here with you all today, and I hope that you all find big funding for your projects, and take care and don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. And everyone keep an eye out for that follow-up email with information on continuing education and a program evaluation.
All right, thanks.
you.
Take care.